Hey guys, great discussion today. Feel like we got cut off right when it was starting to get good, right at the hour mark. I knew that was going to happen. That's why I planned this topic to be in two parts. So don't worry, we will pick up right where we left off next week in part two. But here's a discussion review of the stuff that we did hit today. And I added some extra stuff since we hit each of your research topics only briefly because we're running out of time. So I added some stuff in here to add into kind of the discussion that we started. And we will continue next week. So here we go. So here were the issues. We first talked about that great city in Revelation 17 and how it was possible for this city to deceive the world and how we can protect ourselves from getting deceived. Great discussion on what the city was. Talked about maybe the Vatican, Washington, D.C., talked about the United Nations, London, a city that doesn't exist yet, or a city that's somewhere that we don't even know that does exist, but it's a secret city. All good stuff to ponder. But what I like the best that you guys mentioned is as far as how to protect ourselves from getting deceived was how you guys mentioned how knowing the Bible, knowing scripture is really going to be our protection as this deception continues to grow and grow. I do recommend we each get a hard copy of the Bible to keep, maybe multiple, because I know we're mostly using the Bible app on our phones right now, but that can easily be taken away. The phones can easily be turned off tomorrow if wanted. And no doubt there might be a getting rid of campaign of the Bible. It's happened many times before, and I can see it happening again. So I agree with you guys. I think our Bibles is going to be the most valued possession that we can have as this deception grows. Also, just kind of being wary on what we see in the media, what we hear in the media, and Maddie mentioned we need to pray and ask for discernment from the Lord on what is what, because as this deception continues to grow, it's going to become hard to know what actually is truth. So discernment from the Lord is definitely a must. So awesome points. Here was just to review my summary of the great city, or what Revelation 17 calls the prostitute. My summary was the great city that rules over the kings of the world, who rules over the masses of people of every nation and language. The kings of the world have betrayed their people by submitting to this great city, and the people who belong to this world have been deceived by the city's ideas and immorality. So that's kind of how I interpret it. I assume you guys tended to agree with this interpretation as well. Of course, the big mystery is, what is this great city? Does this great city exist now? Is it going to exist in the future, right? That's the mystery that we got to kind of unravel and protect ourselves from. I went down the little sidebar of that statue on top of the Congress building, so we talked a little bit about that. I don't know, it was just on my mind this week, so I decided to research it. So talk to you guys about it. Here's kind of just a review of what I found. So that statue on top of our Congress building was authorized back in 1855 by a guy named Thomas U. Walter, right? He had a drawing. He was an architect. He had a drawing, and the statue was authorized based off of that drawing. There was a guy named Thomas Crawford who designed the statue based off of Thomas Walter's drawing. And what got weird here is, designing this statue, he was invoking the goddess Minerva, or Bellona, or what people commonly know as Athena. And this was in Rome, Italy. So the statue idea that sits on top of our Congress building came from Rome. So that's interesting. And it was reference to a Roman goddess, Minerva or Athena, which is another interesting thing. And then, Esther mentioned later with her research on the Illuminati that there was some tie to the Illuminati and Minerva. So we need to definitely talk more about that when we meet next week, since that's kind of where our time cut off. But I had mentioned that I thought the statue was called Columbia, and DC being this District of Columbia, it's a district to this statue. But apparently it was not actually called Columbia. But so I don't know. I don't know. Commonly, this statue is known as Columbia on top of the Congress building. But as you research it, it said it wasn't actually named that when it was made. What was alarming too was how Columbia, or Athena, or the prostitute, whatever you want to call this statue, on top of our government building. Freedom, right? A lot of people call it, freedom, Lady Freedom, in reference to, the statue that's in New York as well. She's standing on a globe with the words E pluribus unum, which means out of many, one. So of course that's a connection there to Revelation 17, where the prostitute rules over the waters, which represents many nations, many tongues, many languages. But then I saw in the research too that she has 10 spikes attached to her head. So that was kind of interesting, especially when we get next week into the beast and how there's 10 horns, and the 10 horns represent 10 kings and stuff. So I don't know, maybe a coincidence, maybe not. Who knows? Of course, the research says that the point of the 10 spikes is to deter birds from, roosting on Minerva's head or whatever. So just a side note there, could this be an icon or symbol of the prostitute in Revelation 17? Maybe, maybe not. I know it was President Clinton in 93 had it. This is the pictures you're seeing now, had it removed and refurbished and then put back on the top of the Capitol building after it was restored. So anyways, interesting side note that we talked about a little bit. Okay, going on to the Scarlet Beast. So didn't get too much to the Scarlet Beast. That's going to be the focus for next week, and how we could protect from it. So we're going to go ahead and pause on the Scarlet Beast. Only thing that we mentioned was the Scarlet Beast association with the dragon, Satan. And that kind of led down a little sidebar conversation about, dragons, like the actual creatures, did they exist? We know in Job, God comes out and tells Job that he created Leviathan, which a description is given of Leviathan and sounds like a dragon. It says sparks come out of Leviathan's nostrils. The scales are so tight together that a spear can't even penetrate it. Go back and, oh boy, I can't remember if it's Job. It's like 38 or 40, somewhere towards the end of the book, and it's got a description of Leviathan. Go back and read it. And then, like it was mentioned how, or Maddie mentioned how, there was dragons in a lot of like stories, like, the Chinese mentioned dragons, and then also talked about how like you had knights fighting dragons about 1,000 years ago, Or these real stories? I don't know. Are dragons around? Are they still around somewhere? Are they going to come back? I don't know. Can Satan possess a dragon or shapeshift into a dragon in the end times? Maybe. I don't know. So kind of a little sidebar conversation we had there. Maybe that's something we need to, dragons may be something we need to research and dive into more in the future. Maybe that could be one of the research topics for your end of semester research project. But going on back to my summary, what we get from scripture from this beast, anyways, in Revelation 17, is that the great city seems to be supported by the scarlet beast, because it says she's sitting on the beast. And the beast has 7 heads and 10 horns, and blasphemies against God are written all over it. So the beast ain't good. The beast is against God. Blasphemies against God are written all over this beast, whatever the beast is, which we'll get into more next week. But for this week, we're concentrating more on the city, right? The great city is noble and wealthy. Its authority promotes obscenities and immorality. It's we're told that the great city was called Babylon the Great, so it has a name. Now, there's no city today named Babylon the Great, so I don't know if this is a secret name assigned to a city that's, exists today, or is a city that's coming that's going to be called Babylon the Great, or is it a secret name for the New World Order that we'll get into here, as Jake mentioned in his research on the first President Bush's speech back in 1990. I don't know. What we do know is that this city rules over all the kings in the world and is responsible for all obscenities in the world. And the great city will be deceived one day with the killings of Christians. Jesus warned about it in Matthew 24. There's a persecution coming. And you could already see in the world today the persecution going on, this hatred towards the Jews, and people chanting in protest right now, death to all Jews. So, and that happened so quickly, just in the last month. So is it possible that one day there will be signs that say death to all Christians? And how do we protect ourselves from that? So we've got to start thinking and preparing for that kind of scenario. Okay, so then we got second half of the class, we got into the research assignments, and then we kind of started running out of time. We didn't hit all 5, we only hit 3, and we hit them briefly. I feel like there was a whole lot more we could have talked about each. So I added a few slides and points that I wanted to bring up for each of the discussion points we went through today. So the first one we went through was about this idea of a new world order. It was mentioned in President Bush, the first Bush, State of the Union back in January of 1991. Jake researched that whole transcript of that speech. He read it. I had to mention the parts about the New World Order. He read it to us. We kind of listened to it. And like Jake said, his idea that he got from it was, it's kind of this uniting of the world. This kind of idea of a New World Order being where all the nations of the world come together. Well, that's interesting given what we just read in Revelation 17, right? About a great city kind of ruling over all nations and tongues. So who knows? Maybe Babylon is the New World Order. This wasn't the first time President Bush, the first Bush, mentioned the New World Order. A few months earlier, on September, he also mentioned it, and it was coming off of the heel of the Cold War. So briefly, I explained what the Cold War was. It was very brief, so I put this slide here to kind of explain it a little bit more in a nutshell. Okay, basically the Cold War was this fight between democracy and communism. The world was either divided for democracy, which they called the First World, communism, which they called the Second World, and then for the countries that did not pick a side but were kind of in the middle, they were called the Third World. So whenever you hear, I'm sure you guys have heard, oh, that's a third world country, doesn't necessarily mean it's a poor country. It just meant that they weren't under the umbrella of either democracy or communism. It was a great competition. The main point of it was who would be the leading superpower. So I wondered, thinking about Revelation 17, could the whole Cold War just been a test to see who will hold the great city? Who will be the superpower of the world? Maybe. If the great city is Washington, D.C., was that determined because we won the Cold War? What if communism and Russia won the Cold War? Would the great city then be Moscow? Maybe. I don't know. Just some ideas in my crazy mind, Or maybe it was a test by the great city. Maybe the great city is something else, and it was testing to see, who would be the superpower to kind of help influence the world. And then someone mentioned, I think it was Maddie, is this competition still going on? Might have been Maddie or someone else. Is the Cold War still going on? Yes, it officially ended, but it does seem like it's going on still, right? Between Russia and the U.S., this unspoken of competition. I think there's new players now. China is definitely in on this competition for being the leading superpower. So yeah, maybe it's still kind of going on. I do know that it did bring about the rise of the United Nations. So United Nations started after World War II. There was 5 founding members in 1945. And when we get to 1991, at the end of the Cold War, at the end of President Bush's New World Order speech, then all of a sudden the UN members jumped to, by 1991, there was 166 member states of the UN. So definitely sounds like a new world order was definitely being born in the early 90s. So I mentioned, President Bush Sr. first mentioned the New World Order in a speech before a joint session of Congress on September 11th, 1990. Interesting date. September 11th came up a lot in our conversation today. Here's a clip. I'm gonna, in the comments, if you want to listen to this speech, you can go ahead and click the link and listen to his speech about the New World Order. I copied the transcript here on this slide just to cover it, and I just highlighted the key words that he said in the middle of the speech. A new relationship between the nations of the world, a new partnership of nations has begun. Again, a new world order. And today that new world is struggling to be born. Now, this was September 11, 1990, when he first mentioned this. So the speech that Jake mentioned in his research was the State of the Union was in January, so a few months after this initial speech. What was interesting is 2 days after this speech on September 11, on September 13, the United Nations adopted Resolution 666. Out of all numbers, right? Got it. That was the next one that was coming up in the order of resolutions. But wow, I'm starting to think, is there really coincidences? Anyways, the resolution was about Iraq, about recalling an embargo and how there was a war looming in the horizon pretty much, and the UN was preparing to move into Iraq and Kuwait after the war to help the population, relieve human suffering, stuff like that, bring in food. So this was interesting. This was September. The war didn't kick off until a few months later, in January, February of 91. January 16 was the official day that the Gulf War began. It lasted through February and into March, when the U.S. coalition basically restored power to Kuwait. So it was a massive show of power. In 2 months, the U.S.-led coalition, so it wasn't just American troops, there was a coalition of different nations, went in and toppled Saddam Hussein army in a couple months and restored power to Kuwait. This definitely established U.S. as the superpower, this display of power during Desert Storm. And then over the next decade, it seemed like U.S. took on this role as kind of like the police of the world. A lot of little conflicts happened in the 90s, like Operation Southern Watch, keeping an eye on, Iraq and all that. Then there was the Somali Civil War. Probably heard about Mogadishu. You had Haiti, you had the Balkans, Kosovo. This was all over the 90s after Desert Storm, where it seemed like if there was a problem somewhere in the world, the U.S. was the police and was there to solve it. Had not, conflicts that really didn't have anything to do with America per se as a nation, but we're being the police of the world, or maybe the police of this new world order that had been established of all nations working together. Then we get into, the year 2000, President Bush Jr., he gets elected, and he mentions it as well in his inauguration speech about a new world, how this new world is a liberator of the old, how the goal is to protect but not possess, to defend but not to conquer, again, kind of like this police mentality, how freedom and democracy is the driving force. Now, all this stuff sounds good, right? I mean, promoting freedom, democracy, peace, right? But it's alarming when you read Revelation 17 about what sounds like a world order where everyone's coming under this kind of a city that's ruling over all kings and nations, kind of like this world unity, supported by the beast. And as we get further on and we eventually get into the Antichrist, you're going to see how there is a world unity that unites under the Antichrist. So I don't know, maybe this whole world unity thing going on right now is kind of setting the stage for the beast, the Antichrist, to be revealed. There's President Bush Jr. mentioned about weapons of mass destruction. We talked a little bit about fear. I asked how can people be so deceived? I think it was Zach that mentioned fear, and he's dead on. I mean, fear is a tool that can make people kind of be deceived or fall in line. Briefly mentioned like COVID and what you guys experienced a few years ago. That might need to be another research topic for your end of semester research, that we could talk about how fear caused people to just kind of, unite, which could be good, but could also be bad as well. So we can talk more about that later. One thing interesting about President Bush Jr.'s speech is, and this is kind of weird, he kind of mentioned about this angel riding in the whirlwind and directs the storm. Now, it was figurative, it was poetic, everybody saw it as poetic, but then I'm reading, I'm like, well, wait, was it poetic, or what's he talking about? He keeps mentioning about this angel riding in the whirlwind. So if you want, kind of go down that rabbit hole, just look up President Bush Jr.'s inauguration speech, and I don't know, it sounds very poetic. It was a good speech, but maybe there's more to some angel behind all this riding in the whirlwind. I don't know. Is it a bad angel? Maybe. We know in scripture we get, Satan is the prince of the air, we get in the New Testament. So I don't know if the angel in the whirlwind could be referencing to that. Talked about a little bit about media. So I wanted to touch more on that. Here's this slide. What was such a big deal about Desert Storm, and I remember I was like maybe 8 years old, something like that, was for the first time you could watch a war live on TV. I remember tuning into the TV and seeing, I could still, even to this day, I still have the picture in my mind of it was a night vision screen, and I could just see a bunch of tracer rounds going up and things blowing up in the distance. And I remember, I was scared. I mean, I was an 8-year-old. I didn't know Iraq was on the other side of the world. I'm thinking, oh man, is this war here? So it definitely struck fear. And with that media coverage, what do we get? Everybody watched as this coalition went in, destroyed about 4,000 tanks, 20 to 35,000 Iraqi soldiers, and the coalition only suffered around 300 casualties. I mean, it was an annihilation. So you think that struck fear? If you're watching this, you're like, whoa, okay, if you're a leader of a nation, you're like, I ain't going against that coalition. Watching how fast the Iraq regiment got destroyed, or regime got destroyed, would you go against a new world order that's that powerful? So I don't know, maybe the new world order is this mystery Babylon that we read about in Revelation chapter 17. All right, then continuing talking about fear, Maddie kind of gave her research on the attack on 9/11 and the timeline of events. A lot of stuff happened that day. Bringing it to just the attack itself, she says 746 was the first impact on the North Tower, and I did some research as well. So here on the slide, I got kind of the timeline of the actual, hits. I remember I was a senior in high school. I remember what was interesting to me today is how quick after that first impact, people were tuned into the TV. By now, 10 years since Desert Storm, we had kind of gotten groomed into when you hear something's going on, immediately turn on the TV. That kind of became the norm. And here I am in class, and I remember the teacher from next door came in, told my teacher, turn the TV on, and we turned it on quick enough that we were able to see the second impact live at 8:03. So I mean, what is that? For the 17 minutes in between the impacts? Within 15 minutes, most of the nation was able to tune in live into the media and watch the second impact happen live. You think that struck fear into the nation? Heck yeah, it did. Even in my own school, it struck fear. I remember everybody freaking out saying, okay, now we are under attack. And, if I could just describe like what was like the feeling of everybody on that day back in September 11 in America, how everybody was definitely struck with fear. And it continued throughout the day. Everybody was glued to the TV all day, watching as a third flight hit to the Pentagon, supposedly. That's another topic there. Or about the one that crashed at 9 a.m. where the guys on board, the passengers on board fought and brought the plane down and all this stuff. So the biggest takeaway is how quick, it's like it was spaced just perfect, the two towers being hit, to have enough time for everybody to tune in and watch it live and get everybody glued into that TV for the rest of the day for the subsequent attacks. Definitely very, very well planned. I don't know how deep the planning goes. Was it just the attackers? Was there more behind it? That's another, we could talk more about that next week too if you guys want. But yeah, it was just like perfectly planned. I'll just leave it at that. Perfectly and professionally planned. We looked at the clip. I'll post the link to this clip in the comments as well. That way, if you want to and kind of see how this unfolded live. I know you guys were not alive when this happened. So if you're going to want to kind of relive that and, see how that was, links in the comments. Okay. Yeah. So we briefly mentioned about September 11th. This was from last week's discussion, how, it's coming, it's coming to the surface that it started to get believed that was actually Jesus' birthday based off of what we talked about last week. If you want to review that, go back to our lesson last week. But kind of interesting that the attack on the Twin Towers happened on this day. Could it have been an attempt to stain the date? And now, 20-something years later, we're discovering, oh man, Jesus' birthday may have actually been on September 11th. Well, good luck trying to go out there in America anyways and being like, hey, we're going to celebrate Jesus' birthday on September 11th because we have proof that that's his birthday. Yeah, right. Like September 11th has been forever stained on American soil because of that attack. So I don't know, maybe. Or like you guys mentioned, maybe it was kind of to mock our 911, our emergency number, right? Like, oh, take that, maybe as well. I don't think it was just a random date. The date was thought of, like I said, this was a very professionally planned attack. By who it was planned, that's another question for debate, but it was definitely well thought of and well planned out all the way up to the date. And what do we get from it, right? So the official story is 19 terrorists linked to Al-Qaeda and Osama bin Laden hijacked 4 commercial airliners and did this attack. What we get from it is it launched what was quoted the war on terror, fear, like Zach mentioned again. And since then, there was a fear of terrorism. There still is to this day. When is the next terrorist attack going to be? So maybe that does play into the mystery Babylon and the uniting of the world. Again, we saw a huge coalition come together in support of America after this, and basically fought a two-front war in Iraq and Afghanistan with this coalition. So maybe it is tied to the mystery Babylon. Maybe we're trying to get, a stake in Iraq because maybe that's where Mystery Babylon City will be in the future. Maybe. I know I mentioned how, at least with American military, we have a lot of gear left over there and a huge base left over there in Iraq as well. So things that make you wonder. Okay, and then this is kind of where we finished. Esther started talking about her research about the Illuminati. Fortunately, she had to get cut off because we were at our hour mark, which is a bummer. But what she quickly mentioned was kind of the founding of it. Sometime around the, I think it was the Renaissance. She said 14 or 1500, somewhere around there. How it was just a society that kind of came together. She mentioned that Roman goddess in there. We had to see more about that. And we just briefly talked as we were walking out just about Illuminati, Freemasons, Skull and Bones, how these secret societies are kind of, as I think of it, kind of like a fraternity, right? They're these secret societies. However, there was a lot of influence if you were part of this secret society. The secret society still exists to today. I gave an example how, you can have, it was networking was the big thing, right? You can get into careers, jobs if you were part of these societies. Then that bled over into political positions as well. Being a Freemason, I think Esther mentioned our four founding fathers of America were Freemasons, so that's cool. So I want to pick up right here in our discussion next week. I want to kind of pick up with, Esther's research on Illuminati, Freemasons, and Skull and Bones, and then lead into our next discussion. So this is where we're gonna pick up. Now I did a little thinking about it as well, and I want to leave you with these thought-provoking questions for when we meet up next week and continue. Could it be that the Great Prostitute is a shadow world government? Some kind of secret world government that is orchestrating every major world event, war, revolution, recession, and all this is behind the scenes. I know that sounds like very conspiracy theory. We joked about conspiracy theories and this and that, but I don't know. The Great Prostitute who rules over many waters. Is it a open city that we can see, or is it something behind the shadows that we don't see that it's secretly running things? I want to pick up there next week. The other one I thought of is, what if that's the case, what if they have infiltrated key positions of authority, like in politics or the economy, or even in religion, like we talked a little bit about the Vatican? What if there's, the kind of these people with this agenda that are in key positions of authority? We get in Revelation 17, the kings of the world have committed adultery with her, with the prostitute. So maybe. And what if they control what we read, what we hear, what we see in order to indoctrinate the populace to their way of thinking? I know the media over the last couple of decades has had a huge influence on the way we see the world. And today it's kind of evolving from, the CNN, Fox News to social media and Instagram. I mean, I joked about it with your guys' generation, and you guys are just glued to that phone all the time throughout the day, just getting information. What if that's under Babylon, and it's indoctrination and the information you're getting. I don't know, I think what we definitely need is, like Maddie said, the prayer of discernment. We need to be in prayer to discern what is truth, because I think as time goes on, the truth is going to become more and more blurry. It's already blurry, and we got to know our scripture. We got to have our faith. I mentioned how the culminating point will be where take the number of the beast. If you take this, you can be part of society. You can leave. You can live. You can eat. You can do everything. If you don't take it, you will get killed. Oh, and by the way, the number of the beast is associated to Satan. What are you going to do? Our faith needs to be at the level that we will say, kill me. It is better to get your head chopped off than to take the number linked to Satan. That's where our faith is going to be. And it's easy to say that right now. Think about how difficult that will be when the sword or the gun is to your head. Would you be able to say, no, I'm not taking that number? Um, I'm sticking with my faith, with my Lord, even to the point of death. So start thinking about how you can protect yourself from this and from the. Hopefully, I'm not going to make you too paranoid, but maybe it's a little bit healthy. Okay, so how does this stuff all tie in together, right? The New World Order, the UN, America, September 11th, Babylon, Iraq, I didn't put there, but the Vatican, Colombia, Lady Freedom, those statues, does that even mean anything? I don't know. The Freemasons, Illuminati, Skull and Bones. And then we talked, we mentioned about the obelisk. Why is there a huge obelisk in Washington, D.C. as the Washington Monument, while there's also one in the Vatican? And then you guys started mentioning just calling out cities, New York City, like I forgot what city you guys call that in the Midwest. Basically, these obelisks are everywhere. What is the deal with the obelisk? So we're going to have to definitely do some research on that and get into the obelisk next week. So here are the research topics for next week, for our next lesson. So definitely the obelisk, like I just mentioned. And I want you guys to just pick which one you want and email me which topic you want to research, and then bring it to the discussion next week. So the obelisk, what's the deal with the obelisk? Why is the Washington Monument an obelisk? Why is there obelisk in every major city in the world? What's the deal with that? What does it mean? We didn't get to Osiris' tomb. The obelisk actually goes back to Osiris. So Zach, I know you did some research on it or were struggling in it, but get back into it, see if you can find about Osiris' tomb discovered in 1999. Nick, I know it was hard to find stuff on Gilgamesh. It was 2003 when the body of Gilgamesh was found. Keep doing some research on that, bring it to next week. I saw you had a paragraph on it, so maybe we'll start off with that next week. And then some other topics that I want to throw out there for just thought-provoking and for research is cloning and hybridization. Somebody can research on that, cloning and hybridization, and how do you think that plays into all this? The Mayan calendar, you guys probably remember this about, what was it, 10, 11 years ago, you guys are probably still kids, but you probably heard about it, the big thing about the Mayan calendar ending in 2012 and how it was going to bring about the end of the world and all that stuff. If you don't remember it, somebody go ahead and take that on and research the Mayan calendar and bring it to the discussion next week. CERN, CERN. It's a research facility in Switzerland, I believe. So I'd like to get some research on that, on what it is that they're doing. Big picture, they're trying to recreate the Big Bang. I don't know if that's a good idea underground here on Earth. But there's also some, look into like, there's some weird, reference to goddesses, and even like, just do some research on CERN, see what you find, and bring it next week. Whoever wants to take that one on, let me know. And I want to talk about the UFO phenomenon. Over the last 10 years, it's increased. It's been going on for a while. Got it, abductions and UFOs. But in today's world, it's becoming way, way more popular. I know everyone out there is talking about it, so I want to talk about it as well. So these are the topics for our discussion next week. Pick one that you want to research. Email me which one you're gonna do. Nick and Zach, pick another one. I know there's not much on the Osiris tomb, body of Gilgamesh. I'll bring what I have. If you find something, bring it. But also pick one of the other topics as well, which maybe you can find some more stuff on. And then we'll discuss all that stuff when we meet for our next discussion. Until then, keep reading your Bible. God bless.